it is 12 o'clock, so we will get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Lunch Without Lunch. Let me just get this started. If you are new to Rainforest, Alberta, welcome. This is our weekly meetup where we connect entrepreneurs, innovators, curious Calgarians, anyone that's interested in learning about tech and innovation. It's our weekly meetup to connect with one another. And so if you're new to Lunch Without Lunch or to Rainforest Alberta, please share an emoji on the screen, introduce yourself in the chat. We want to get to know you and welcome you to the community. And I'm Amber Rowden. I'm the community storyteller here in Calgary. We also have Bridget Legault, who's the community manager in Calgary. We also have a steering committee up in Edmonton. And so there's a bunch of volunteers up there that have Rainforest Alberta and Edmonton. So if you're in the Edmonton area, it's a great place to go to connect resources. However, we do share the Lunch Without Lunch, and we amplify people both in Edmonton and in Calgary. I want to start the land acknowledgement. So in the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge that we work and play on the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Siksika, the Kainai, and the Piikani, the Tsuut'ina, the Stoney Nakoda Nations, the Métis Nation Region 3, and all people who make their homes in the Treaty 7 region of Southern Alberta. I'd like to acknowledge that if you're coming from somewhere else in the country or the world or the province, please feel free to share land acknowledgement in the chat. And we're always willing to we always want to work on reconciliation in the Rainforest Alberta community. So if you want to share land acknowledgement at Lunch Without Lunch, or if you want to, share about reconciliation, we would love to have you share that at Lunch Without Lunch or in a larger capacity with the community. So please feel free to contact myself or Bridget if that's something that you would like to do. So what is Rainforest Alberta? Well, we're a community of innovators, dreamers, doers, working together to build a community of collaboration, of trust, of diversity across Alberta. And we do that through, meetings, through breaking down barriers, through honest conversations. And so I'll play this video. It gives you a little snippet into what we are. And here we go.
What does it take to realize an idea or for a seed to sprout? At Rainforest Alberta, we know the answer is rooted in trust. Traditionally, Albertans have cultivated their ideas in established systems. Inputs that don't fit these systems are weeded out. Opportunities for growth are missed. But now, Albertans want a dynamic landscape that can evolve organically, like a rainforest. At Rainforest Alberta, we believe a culture of trust is the fertile soil where ideas grow. Our budding innovation ecosystem is a network of relationships pulling each other up as they push forward in their own field. Trust breaks down barriers. An open, inclusive network increases collaborative innovation. Successful breakthroughs inspire new ideas. A cycle begins. Rainforest Alberta is a movement to amplify trust by cultivating honesty, inclusion, and accountability. How? Our social contract holds us accountable to demonstrate trust across the province. We meet to have honest conversations around collaboration. This leads to more inclusive spaces for everyone to fearlessly build new ideas together. By raising the standard of trust, Alberta's ideas, talent, and resources can be evergreen. Visit rainforestab.ca to sign the social contract and start growing together.
All right, so we use 6 pillars to guide our conversations and actions. And like any ecosystem, the right balance is crucial, and they're all weighted differently. We measure these each year through our scorecard assessment. So Edmonton has a scorecard assessment and Calgary has a scorecard assessment. However, this year we're doing a pan-provincial scorecard, which will be really awesome to collect data from all over Alberta and see the strengths and weaknesses and how we can work to improve the tech and innovation sector across Alberta. So at Rainforest, we focus a lot on culture, and it's weighted at 30%. 20% for leaders, 15% for resources, 10% for engaged activities, 15% for policy and infrastructure, and 10% for role models. Our scorecard assessment will be coming out probably beginning of 2024. So stay tuned for that. We'll definitely share that with you. And tips to making the most out of Lunch Without Lunch. Introduce yourself in the chat, what you're working on, what you're looking for, what you can offer. Just share in the chat who you are, a little bit about yourself. It's all about making connections and getting to know one another. That's the whole purpose of Rainforest, is those connections. Connect with individuals through direct messaging. Put your camera on. It's always great to see everyone's faces, matching name with face. Ask questions that lead with curiosity rather than offering advice. Ask questions and connect our digital community, which I will share in a couple slides. You can check out the lunch notes for capture of today's chat on Slack. And our recordings are always posted on YouTube. So if you missed a session or you want to check out previous sessions, you can always check them out on our YouTube. So our social contract are 10 values that we work, live, and play by. They're ways that we grow together, and we ask that if anyone's joining the community that you commit to these 10 values in the way that you interact with people, in the way that you're growing ideas, collaborating with each other. And you can sign the social contract by scanning that QR code, or I'll throw a link in the chat as well. And once you sign the social contract, you'll gain access to the Slack channel, our digital community, as well as the newsletter and an onboarding email. And then if you're curious about anything and everything, our digital community powered by Inkly gives you access to diverse perspectives, ways to connect with someone that can give you answers to the questions that you're looking for. So it's another way to connect with folks that are providing you with resources that you may need. If you're looking for a co-founder, if you're interested in how to navigate the tech and innovation community in Calgary or Edmonton or anywhere else across Alberta or even Canada, it's a great place to do that. So if you have your phone, please take it out and scan this barcode. I'll also throw the link in the chat, and it takes like 1 second to sign up. And if you have any trouble with that, please feel free to reach out to myself or Bridget, and we are very happy to help you with that. All right. So usually this is the part where I introduce the guest speaker, and I'm going to, but you're gonna still hear me talk. Usually I don't talk anymore, but so if you don't know me, I am Amber Rowden. I am community storyteller at Rainforest, Alberta. I also am the digital and content lead at Start Me Up PR, and I am a co-founder of YYC Queer Innovation Meetups. And so today I'll be sharing with you about YYC Queer Innovation Meetups alongside my wonderful co-founder, Ty McKinney, and he's also the founder of 8-Bit Cortex. So to start it off, I'm going to share the presentation and I'm going to pass it on over to Ty.
All right, we'll wait for that to go into full screen and then we'll get started. But I guess while waiting for that, how's everyone doing? Feel free to put an emoji or some expression into the chat.
It's a great day, Ty.
There we go. Thank you, Pete. All right. So today we wanted to share with you some of the work that Amber and I have been doing within the tech ecosystem, but specifically focusing on queer people. And this is very timely because we were just at the QueerTech Conference in Montreal last week. We got to make a ton of really good connections. So we wanted to share with you, in addition to some of the work that we have been doing, some of the things that we're going to be looking forward to over the next little while, and some of our more strategic directions coming out of the conference.
All right. So who is the YYC Queer Innovation Meetup? So when I first started in tech and when Ty first started in tech, we both noticed a lack of representation within the LGBTQ2S+ community. And so in June 2022, we actually, or before June 2022, me and Ty met and we got to talking and we're like, hey, we're both queer and we don't really see anyone else like us. There's no other queer folks at this event or in any other, tech event in Calgary, or if there are, we don't see them, there's no representation. So we got to talking and we're like, let's create the YYC Queer Innovation Meetup as a place where we can partner with queer-owned businesses to host meetups where queer founders, innovators, and entrepreneurs in Calgary can come together to, share resources, create representation, and, create a safe space to foster meaningful connections and break biases within that sector and create more representation.
Yeah, so I want to briefly introduce you to our founding team. You have already met Amber, my lovely co-founder. Amber has really taken the lead on doing all of our communication strategy. Makes sense given her roles with Rainforest and Storming Up PR. I'm really grateful for the work that Amber has done, being able to really share all the work that we have been doing with the community. I'd be taking a little bit more of a business development role in trying to figure out exactly how do we take what is currently a grassroots meetup movement and actually transform it into something that's going to create impact within our community. And then Rachel Anderson is our community director. Basically, she tells Amber and I what to do to make sure that things get done. So then that way, the three of us all move forward on our events together. Together, we've had a lot of fun cultivating this community and helping it grow and thrive over the last year or so. So I'm really excited to keep working with both Amber and Rachel moving forward. So as Amber mentioned, really where we started with was by trying to host inclusive events. And we wanted to try to keep this as queer as possible in the spirit of inclusivity. So we tried reaching out initially to different queer-owned businesses and trying to see whether or not they would be willing to host events for us. So that way we could develop a bit of collaboration. And overall, this model has worked it's worked pretty well. We've now got a handful of different venue partners that have worked with us in the past and are interested in continuing to do so, such as Spirits with Smoke is where we had our last event at, based out of the Inglewood rail yards. The Work Nicer outpost in Inglewood, their rail yards outpost. That's where we had our last really big event that had over 40 people come out. And when we have these events, really what we're trying to do is trying to create the opportunity for connections to happen. As Amber mentioned, if you're in the tech community, and one thing that's really good about Calgary is oftentimes you can just go up to someone and have a conversation and get a referral or recommendation and get connected to the next person that you need to. And that's a really beautiful part of Calgary's ecosystem, as we'll talk about a little bit more when I reflect on the conference. But if you're a queer person, that ability to take advantage of this aspect of Calgary's ecosystem can sometimes be a little intimidating. Oftentimes there's the fear, am I coming off too strong? Is there going to be any potential for discrimination or those kinds of concerns? Growing up in small town Alberta, those concerns were very much a reality for a lot of my life. And now that I'm living in Calgary and growing this wonderful community, it's much less of a concern. But those tendencies are still there. And I know that that's not just something that's experienced by myself, but other people within our meetup as well. So really having that safe space where we can all get together and discuss these kinds of issues and tackle these kinds of challenges and be able to give those small world connections to our colleagues really can create a lot of different opportunities. So we have a couple different anecdotes from there. And this has really been the inspiration for us to be like, okay, how can we start leveling this up? How can we go beyond creating the meetup groups and start having more opportunities created for queer people? Ultimately, we want Calgary to be the best place for queer people to create a career for themselves in tech. And I think we're well on the way there.
Yeah, so I think Ty touched on it like quite a lot, but so yeah, we host inclusive events open to anyone who identifies as part of the LGBTQ2S+ community, either working in the innovation sector or outside the innovation sector, supportive allies and partners that we work with. We break bias, create a space for vulnerable conversations to break down the biases and barriers that exist for queer folks within the innovation sector. There are already the biases that a lot of us experience in our everyday lives, but then there's a layer added when you're going into the workplace or the tech sector, especially with like an emerging industry where traditionally there isn't that representation. So we work with organizations and partners and within the group to create meaningful events where queer folks, we can address inclusion and belonging and create spaces that are actually inclusive and safe. Representation. That when we started, that was, one of the biggest goals in our visions, was to create representation among queer founders, and that's still what we're striving to do. And a lot of the folks in our group are passionate and active advocates in their industries, their personal lives. They attend protests, they attend local community events, they're speaking on panels, they're speaking on conferences, and they bring awareness to the barriers that queer founders and folks face. And so we try to amplify these innovators, by sharing their story throughout the Calgary tech ecosystem. And then we also try to build community. I mean, community is everything. And so through cross-sector connections, we provide, a community for founders with a safe space to explore entrepreneurship, collaboration, and just to connect with each other, to feel safe. So we thought it'd be fun to share a little bit of the milestones that we've had. And so, we were founded in June of 2022. We held our first event, and, we had about 30 folks come out. Since then, we've held 14 events with 214 folks, new and returning. We've had, over 5 speaking engagements, one including at the QueerTech Conference. We have 20 active members within the community. As Ty mentioned, we're working with partners. So we've hosted 2 Pride viewing parties with Platform Calgary. We hosted a Pride after party with Spirits with Smoke. We've partnered with them a few times to do events, and they're really a great queer-owned business, and they're really supportive of what we're doing and creating those inclusive connections. And then we walked in the Pride Parade with Calgary Economic Development, and we're still working with Calgary Economic Development to create a more inclusive and queer ecosystem. So we're really excited about these partnerships happening and the traction that we're gaining, and not just for the group, but for all of the founders and innovators and folks in the industry, and the work that they're doing, and celebrating them. So I'll pass it to you, Ty.
Yeah, so as Amber mentioned, the most recent aspect of our journey was attending the QueerTech Conference this last week in Montreal. So QueerTech, their story is actually very similar to Amber and my own. And this is, again, a theme that we heard resonated across multiple conversations at the conference. So originally, QueerTech was created as a meetup group based out of Montreal. And long story short, they had tremendous success. Turns out they're really tapping into an unmet need. There are a lot of queer people that have been working in tech and seeking that representation, like Amber and I were talking about, but not seeing that representation. So having a space where people could meet and start developing these connections is an untapped need across many communities all across Canada. So QueerTech formed into a nonprofit, I believe, in 2018, if I'm not mistaken. And that's when they really started to level up their programming. Their goals so they have 3 main goals that they're really trying to accomplish as an organization. The first one is to get more queer representation in tech. So taking queer people that are interested in tech and helping them get jobs within the industry. So this often can look like some concrete skills training, networking, those sorts of things. The next pillar of their programming is trying to help queer people climb the corporate ladder and get into more leadership and management positions. This was the first conference that they had where they actually had a specific leadership track. And I found it very helpful to connect with other leaders that were in other queer leaders that are in tech, and realize that some of the experiences that I've had overlapped with some of their own. And they say the one thing that really resonated with me is that there's always a constant coming out process. So whenever you break into a new role, you kind of have to go through the process of helping the new set of leaders that you're working with kind of learn what it's like to work with a queer person and what that all entails, the benefits that come with it. And then finally, their last pillar is trying to actually have more queer entrepreneurs. So we were able to meet a handful of queer entrepreneurs at the conference, and I'm really excited to realize that there's going to be more of them next when we attend. So based on their national mandate and our local mandate, we're recognizing there's actually quite a bit of synergy. So attending this conference is a really good opportunity for us to tap into what some of the broader ecosystem needs are, as well as how we might be able to support and vice versa. So overall, we're really excited to be partnering with QueerTech moving forward and finding these additional synergies.
Yeah, it was just like such an awesome experience, and the synergies that like Ty mentioned, like how QueerTech and how we align, and like just seeing the representation at the QueerTech conference and like the community, it was incredible. And bringing that energy back to here and seeing how we can like create that synergy here is something that I'm really excited about as well. And so some of the reflections that I've had from the conference was a safe and inclusive space. Now I know that that's kind of tossed around a lot, and you know, what is a real safe and inclusive space? You know, from the moment I walked in, I was in a space where I could actually be myself. I could see folks that, you know, were like me. I didn't have to hold back and like hide who I was. I wasn't scared to be myself. One of the things that they said, you know, when they opened up was, we want you to be yourself fully and authentically. You don't have to hide who you are. And, you know, a lot of times, you know, if I'm speaking at a panel or if I'm sharing something, I feel like I have to, you know, hide myself, or like people are going to judge what I'm saying or question the barriers and challenges that I have. But there, it was so refreshing to like feel safe and be like, yeah, my experiences, they do mean something and they are valid, and like no one's going to question that. You know, during my panel, I actually even felt safe to like share that I use they them pronouns and she they pronouns. So that was something that was like a safe space for me to explore that and share that, and to, you know, become comfortable in sharing my voice, and really encourage that open dialogue and creating visible presence that we're trying to curate here and bring that back. Also the representation and the diverse perspectives. The panels and the tracks that they offered, it was like a diversity of speakers and topics and sessions, and it was across the country. So to hear not only like lived experiences from folks in Montreal, but to hear it from like Toronto, from Vancouver, from Nova Scotia, and hearing their experiences from as a queer individual, but also like the different ecosystems and the challenges they're facing as founders and innovators. It was really cool to like have that synergy come together and like see that representation, and just, you know, see what we can do to like make each ecosystem stronger separately, but then also how do we make each ecosystem stronger together as queer folks. And then I said this before, but community really is everything. I'm a big community builder. I love community. I mean, I think that's partially why I'm a community storyteller, and also why, you know, YYC Queer Innovation was created, you know, to create that community collaboration that leads to partnerships, to new friendships. The friendships that were built at that conference, and the partnerships and the conversations, it was just a safe place to you know, build collaborations and connections, and yeah, share a sense of myself. I feel like I'm still kind of processing the conference, so if I'm like just kind of rambling, I apologize. But yeah, it was just really an unreal experience, and it's really hard to like put into words. That's just the synergy and the energy, and how safe and supported and represented that I felt was. It's just something that I can't even explain. And I'm really excited, really excited to work with QueerTech, and to, you know, hopefully bring that energy and synergy and support to Calgary. Yeah, so I'm going to pass it over to Ty.
Awesome. So I wanted to try to get some reflection. So I want to start off by saying I agree with basically everything Amber said, but rather than just saying me too, I wanted to come up with a little bit more of a list in that regard. And I think really based on everything that Amber just said, there's a few things we can start to kind of build upon. And the first one is the sense of genuine collaboration. I find that often when I go to conferences or networking events, there's a lot of interesting collaboration, but sometimes it feels like a bit of a lip service. It's like, oh, like, let me listen to your pitch. I'll give you my business card. I'll say we'll collaborate, and maybe we'll connect on LinkedIn. Maybe we won't, but it's probably not going anywhere. Whereas with all the people that I was connecting with at the QueerTech Conference, there was a genuine interest in the work that I was doing. They were doing genuinely interesting work. And we got into really deep, nerdy conversations about how potentially it could be collaborating and really getting into some of those nitty-gritty details. I was genuinely shocked by the lack of small talk at the conference. It's almost like we were all ready to just be tech nerds with one another. And again, as Amber said, to be our authentic self. And I think that enthusiasm leads to a lot of goodwill within a business ecosystem, because then now you're finding other people that potentially could be partners, vendors, or clients. So that was all one of the really big inspirational moments for me, is again, how do we take that authenticity and interest in collaboration and make that more widespread? I think this is something that the queer tech community seems to be doing really well. And how can we make this more generalizable within the Calgary tech ecosystem more broadly? The other thing that I really started to get a sense of while attending the conference is how complementary different ecosystems can be. So in Alberta, we've got a bit of a newer ecosystem that's still in its fledgling stages and still growing. And that has a lot of opportunities, but some challenges. Whereas when we're talking with some of the people from the Montreal and Toronto tech ecosystems, they're a bit more mature. So there's complementary opportunities there. Their capital is much more developed than ours. So as a result, being able to tap into some of their capital is a really big, exciting opportunity for companies here in Alberta. Especially considering there is even one investor that specifically wants to try to invest in underrepresented founders. Like queer founders. Even things like the fact that in Alberta, we have a lot of new software developers, recent graduates, whereas in Toronto, Montreal, they had more senior ones. There's a little bit of synergy there. And the different grant opportunities that are available between the different ecosystems can, again, really help strengthen. And then not only that, but again, there are these national level organizations that are really trying to tie everything together. One of the most exciting connections that I made with a gentleman from the LGBT Chamber of Commerce of Canada. It's got a slightly longer name, but that's the one that I can easily pronounce. And he was telling me about a diversity supplier program where basically if you have a company that's got operations and existing customers, you can get certified to be a diverse supplier. And then the Chamber of Commerce will help you make connections with other larger companies and industries in order to try to diversify their supply chains to get more queer representation within that regard. So I think that was one example of a really exciting program for that I previously didn't know about. Again, for how the different ecosystems could be more complementary and how this desire for genuine collaboration is really driving it. And then finally, as you probably inferred from some of Amber's comments, DE&I, diversity, equity, inclusion, was a really big theme at the conference. One thing that I thought was really exciting is how there's a lot of people that went the next step. I find that oftentimes when we talk about D&I, we tend to look at more surface level features like age, race, gender, those sorts of things. Whereas neurodiversity is difference in how our brain is functioning and feeling. And a lot of queer people tend to also be neurodiverse. There's a stronger correlation there. And it was really cool to be in a conference where a lot of people just implicitly understood that my brain works a little differently than yours, and that's entirely okay. And there's lots of optionality for how you can engage with the conference in different capacities. So it was really cool to see the inclusion go to that next level of not just those surface level features, but also how do you want to be interacted with as a human being? Do you want to be an introvert and stand at the back of the room? That's totally fine. You can do that. Do you want to be up near the front so that you can engage with the panelists? That's also super cool, and you can do that as well. Do you need to take a break because your attention span's running a little short and you've been listening to lots of really excited people for the last hour? That's also necessary and okay. So again, it was really inspiring to be part of a community that just understood these kinds of values and didn't take any issue with trying to be a collaborative and understanding what your needs are and where you can meet. So just before we go on to the next slide, does anybody have any questions for Amber now? Now that we've kind of shared with you what YYC Queer Innovation Meetup is doing, what we did at the conference and what our experience is like and what some of our goals are, do you guys have any questions for us?
I have one.
I think I hear Pete. There we go.
Hi. I've traveled the world quite a bit, and I've been in the innovation and technical innovation space pretty much my whole life. And I just found that traveling region to region throughout that time, for example, going from Calgary to Palo Alto and San Francisco or various states and in Europe, it really varied region to region in terms of, how progressive things were. And I find that I always found that Calgary was more on the reserved side, not just on the diversity and inclusion, but also on the risk aversion for investments, proactiveness and new startups and that sort of stuff. So I think that's part of this conversation. Do you not think so, Ty and Amber?
No, 1%. I think you're tapping into a really good piece of insight there. And again, like depending on the regional constraints and the people that make up different ecosystems, there's going to be different personality profiles that play in there. And I think that if you have something like a common identity, like, being queer, that creates a bridge for us to try to bridge those different ecosystems. So now we can be like, okay, what do I have to offer? What do you have to offer? And how can we find ways to be more complementary and synergistic in that regard? So no, I completely agree with you, is that there's a lot of good things that Calgary's ecosystem have, but it does have some challenges. And to the extent that we don't try to solve those challenges ourselves, that we can, collaborate with other people where their strengths can complement our weaknesses, I think that goes a really long way. And it looks like Krista's hand is up.
Yeah, hi. Thanks. I really enjoyed this. There was a big nugget that you dropped, Ty, about the Calgary, or not Calgary, but the Canada Queer Chamber of Commerce. I'm just on their website right now because I feel like that's a call to action. Like we all need to get in there. But I'm curious, from your perspective, with the group that you all are overseeing, is there an opportunity for us to partner more with an Alberta version of that chamber to kind of lift its profile, to make it maybe match some things that we see, with Calgary Chamber, for instance? Like we're members there, but honestly, there's been no value yet to date for us, and specifically not for our community. But if there is an equivalent in Alberta, not to say that they should be not as important, but like, how can we as a group get more of that information out to business owners? Because I don't know, like what you just shared there was huge. Like just being a preferred vendor on this site or having a status that can be findable is one pathway for success for us as we try to grow our businesses.
Yeah, no, 100%. So I guess the short answer to your question is kind of depends on exactly what kind of initiative you're looking for. So the queer representation of the supply chain, that was specifically for the Chamber of Commerce, the LGBT Chamber of Commerce, is at the federal level. So that's their scope of mandate, is to get, I think it's like 400 businesses certified as a diverse supplier within the next 2 years or so, and they got some federal funding for that. In a similar vein, that organization also received some money from the federal government for ecosystem development for queer entrepreneurship. So individual companies cannot directly apply for them, but ecosystem partners and other kind of more institutional players within Calgary, they would be able to access some of that funding. This is being announced super new. So like, I've been trying to get details, and I got a few more details this time as opposed to last time I had this conversation with some of the people from the chamber. But it's forthcoming, so that's another opportunity for us to kind of tap in. There is an Alberta-based LGBT Chamber of Commerce. I've got some connections there, so I'd be more than happy to set you up with them. They do similar kinds of activities, but again, more at the regional level. And they don't have that specific a queer supplier program, but they do have a list of companies that are endorsed where you can do that small world networking a little bit more effectively. And if you're looking for how we can make this with the Calgary Chamber of Commerce, you and I both know Jam, and we can make that happen.
Sweet. Are there any other questions?
I think there's one in the chat.
Oh, so I think I see here one from Maggie Knight. Amber mentioned that sometimes that someone had said something along the lines of, we invite you to show up as your full self. And I'm curious what other attributes confirm that trust to being able to show up comfortably. So Amber, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, first of all, there was like it was all queer people mostly that were there, queer identifying, but of course, not every space is going to have all queer identifying folks. It was just the fact that you could share who you are, and not be scared. Typical, like I go to an event here, and immediately I'm like, oh, I don't know if I can say that because I'm going to get judged or I'm going to get called out, and like you shouldn't have to feel that way, or that you're going to get judged or discriminated against, and that's anyone that's an underrepresented group, right? And there it was just, you could say what you wanted to say, you could be yourself. I find in professional settings, I don't talk a lot. I hold back like who I am, and it's hard for me to be vulnerable, but there you were able to just I don't know how to explain it, just be yourself. Like you could share the barriers that you face in the professional space, and you don't have heteronormative white straight males come at you and be like, you're wrong, those aren't barriers that you face. But those are barriers that you face. They can't take that experience away from you. You're in a room where people are like, yeah, that happened, I have an experience like this, I have an experience like that, and we validate you. Like that's validation. So just to have that, like that you're valued, you do belong, it's something that like I can't describe. And that's something that like I want to bring to Calgary, because that needs to happen. And it shouldn't take like a community of queer folks or underrepresented folks to like represent that feeling. It should be just something that happens. I don't know if that answered the question. I get really passionate, I'm sorry.
The one thing that I'll kind of add to expand onto that, and then I see Ross, you have your hand up as well, so I'll get to you next there. And this is where I think the representation aspect actually is really important, because again, if you can see someone like yourself in a leadership position or in a job that you would like to hold, or some other position of authority, that goes a really long way to feel like you could be in that similar kind of position and have and be authentic in that capacity. And when Amber and I first met, we didn't feel like there's that representation at all. Whereas like now that we've done Queer Innovation Meetup for over a year now, we actually have a lot of people we've been able to connect with that were there that we just simply didn't know were there. Christy being a good example, someone that's come out to a lot of our events and is now a really strong collaborative partner for these initiatives. And again, once you start having those connections, you start to see the representation. Those concerns that Amber just said, they start to lessen a little bit, because then it's like, okay, it's almost like we have implicit permission to be authentic. And I think at QueerTech, they just went above and beyond to really make sure that that permission was explicit, but really want to get towards that implicit permission for everyone, not just queer people. Once everybody can have that tech bro-y energy, then I think we're all winning. Unless that's not quite the energy that you want to give off, but you know what I mean. Ross.
I'm curious if there was any, or I guess I'm trying to figure out a better way to phrase this. Was there much representation of companies being at the conference, or was it predominantly like small startups and groups? And was there any representation or word from the larger organizations providing either resources or capacity? I'm also just thinking that when people are going out into the ecosystem and wanting to engage with companies, if there's a good way to see which ones are the more comfortably accepting ones that are already a part of the community there, and if there's any other resources you wanted to share.
Yeah.
100%. Oh, Amber, do you want to go first?
Okay. Yeah, there was they had booths with a bunch of different sponsors and partners that QueerTech works with. And so these companies, you could go around, chat with them. and see what they're doing. And then they had a few that like were on stage at the main, so they had different sessions, but then they had I forget the word, but like a main session that everyone could go to that you could check out, and like they would share Ty, what were you gonna say? That's yeah.
Yeah, so basically they had a number of larger enterprise scale companies that acted as sponsors, and they all had representation there. And you could tell there's a bit of geographic bias in how these sponsors were selected. So I think this actually creates an opportunity for Calgary. So like a bunch of banks were there, like RBC was there. I can't remember if TD was there, but I feel like they ought to be in there. KPMG was there, Accenture was there. Yeah, so there's a handful of kind of the bigger ones, and they were talking about the different employee resource groups they had around queer people. There was a number of recruiters there that, again, were really trying to actually hire queer people into their organizations. So that was really optimistic. So they're really living up to that aspect of the QueerTech's mandate. Via Rail was there, which has like no presence in Western Canada. So I was like, oh, maybe that's something we can fix. But then when we were talking about how they could bring their conference out to Calgary in a year or two, they said one of the big things that they would be looking for is a sponsorship. What sponsorship opportunities are present in Calgary with companies that are already queer friendly in order to really start strengthening those ties? So thinking about companies like Purpose Med or WestJet, that again, or TD here, I think Deloitte has a good as well. That have done a good job of being present here in Calgary and would be natural partners when they want to come westward.
Monica.
Yeah, so first of all, thank you for this conversation. It's been really, really great. I am a tech recruiter, and I'm queer myself and don't necessarily talk about it as openly as maybe I should. But I know that sometimes when I'm hiring for companies and they specifically say we would like someone trans or in the LGBTQI plus environment, on my side, and this is probably going to be a different answer for everybody because I know we're all humans and we all have different feelings, but I don't know if I would want to be hired or the only person talking because I'm queer, if that makes sense. Like queerness is not my only trait. I have everything else to bring. And I do know a few candidates that when I talk to them, oh, this person is actively looking for someone trans. And they're like, I don't want to just go in because I'm trans. I want to go in because I'm a senior developer, right? So I guess, do you guys have any tips on how I could navigate that tough conversation?
Yeah, no, I really see the distinction there. This echoes a conversation I had with some people from the Jedi Hub over employment around disability. Long story short, there's a company that wanted to hire someone specifically because they were disabled for PR reasons, which that's not really the best way to go about this kind of stuff. So I guess in that regard, I would really think about why is that company wanting to hire a queer person? Are they trying to create a more inclusive culture? If so, then yes, they do need a software developer, but they can have a queer software developer that will kind of help add towards the culture, and perhaps like get some increased tolerance of those sorts of things. This is somewhat anecdotal. I think I could probably back this up with data if I had enough time to do a comprehensive survey. But I find that queer people tend to be quite resilient and creative. We're used to being the others in many regards. We're used to kind of finding those shortcuts and, being very resourceful for how we accomplish our goals. So that's one trait that can come with being queer that might be valuable for particular roles. So those are kind of how I might approach those conversations. Again, it's not, you don't want like a tokenist hire, you want an authentic hire where the person that's being hired will actually contribute towards the culture of the company in some capacity.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have to like not echo what Ty said, but I think, yeah, like why are they asking? Like, why are they looking for like a trans or a queer person? Like, is it just to fill that like check mark, or is it actually like, I'm like, yeah, why are they specifically looking for that, So, yeah.
And then I think I saw Pete had his hand up first.
So this is in line with what Monica, you said. It's, a world right now that it's shifted quite quickly. And there's a lot of tokenism that happens. I mean, that happens on the Indigenous front, that happens on so many different fronts. So, I mean, it's a bit of a greenwash sort of a thing. And my feeling is, as I hire people, growing businesses, I love to have people come in with their quals first. This is what I can do. This is what I think I can do. This is how I work. You know, here's the things that I know how to do, and here's my creativity side. And yes, I'm queer. You know, that sort of thing is fine. I'd say is kind of my conservative white guy view of things. Anyway, comment. That's it.
No, and I think that's entirely appropriate. Because again, I think in an ideal world, like the fact that we're queer should not really play a factor in a lot of these decisions. Historically, that's not been the case. It's been negative discrimination because of that identity. And ideally, we want to get back to the peak where you're talking about, where it's really based on the qualifications, and like the fact that we're queer is like, you know, somewhere down like point C or D or something like that. But it will take a little bit of I don't want to say like a little bit of tokenism, but it does take a little bit of kind of that initial kind of seeding the employment base to get a little bit more queer representation in order to kind of overcome that boundary. So I think a lot of the DE&I initiatives right now, as far as representation, I really think they should just be a short-term solution in the sense that, you know, get some representation in there, get change the culture a little bit, and then it can kind of revert back to being the more organic approach, Pete, that you're talking about, where again, it's all about what can you do for you as an individual person without those labels complicating the conversation as much.
Thanks, Ty.
Alan?
And then Alan.
Hello, long time no see. I was just wondering as well, because when I was searching for the the Gay Canadian Chamber of Commerce, that kind of thing, the other thing that came up was Pride at Work, which I know is another organization. Do we have a connection with them? Like I know it's been a while since I've been to a few of their functions. I kind of dropped out of that with COVID, but I haven't been to any of their functions since. Do we have members that are also members there?
Possibly. So there's a Calgary-based group called Pride in Business, which is very similar to what Amber and I've been doing, but it's more general than tech, not just for people in tech. They do awesome events that have been fabulous. And Krista, some of the things that you're talking about, the Calgary Chamber of Commerce, those sort of thing, like I know those kinds of conversations have happened at those events in the past. It kind of gives you a sense of that. I believe Pride at Work is a separate organization. I think there was somebody there at the conference, but I didn't personally get a chance to speak with them to make that connection. I think they are doing similar kinds of things, but again, I believe they're at more of a Canada-wide scale, whereas we're trying to focus specifically on Calgary. And then Pride in Business is Calgary, but more sector agnostic.
Okay. Maybe like I'm sorry, I'm not on top of any current events that we're doing right now either with our group. But maybe it's because I know sometimes we've been having a little bit more social experiences, like with going up for cocktails and those kinds of things. Maybe maybe we could become a larger force if we maybe invite them along to some of our functions. So.
No, 1%. And we're actually looking at different ways again where we could do those kinds of collaborations. Amber and I recently met with some people from Startup TNT where they're looking to have some more queer representation in their investor pool. So one of the things we're trying to do for networking at QueerTech was see if we could actually find some queer investors, preferably prairie-based, that were interested in participating and do joint events in order to try to break some of those ice, try to break that ice. The one thing that really came through from that conversation is that on the heteronormative side, oftentimes there's a lot of anxiety interacting with queer people because they're scared they're going to offend us in some capacity. Whereas in my experience, we're actually rather difficult to offend as long as you're being respectful. But there is still that initial uncertainty and anxiety. And again, having opportunities for the different communities to overlap and kind of realize that actually those anxieties aren't founded and that we can all just be humans together and find ways to collaborate. Those, again, some of the initiatives that we're going to be pushing for in 2025.
Cool.
All right.
Thanks.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Ty, for sharing. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. This is the networking part. So we do have time for one breakout room. Please stick around if you can. I promise this is where some of the magic happens, the collaborations, the connections. And then we'll probably only have time for one, and then we'll come back at 12:55 for community announcements. So if you have any announcements, please get those queued up. And I will start the breakout rooms. Welcome back, everyone. I think we have it. Oh, not yet. Okay. Welcome back, everyone. Sorry that was so short. I love when people don't come back when I close the breakout rooms. That means the conversations are good. And I love that everyone stayed on to connect. I love it. That's the best part, I promise you. So I just want to say thank you, Ty, for sharing, and thank you everyone for joining us. There's a lot of folks here from the Queer Innovation Meetup that have joined. So thank you so much for being here as well. And thank you to everyone that's come out to hear us share our experiences. Really, really appreciate it. So I have a couple announcements. Lunch Without Lunch next week will not be online. We will only be in person. We'll be at KPMG. We'll be doing some in-person networking there for Innovation Week. So please come out and join us. It'll be a lot of fun. We'll also be Art Proctor has an event happening at 12. So we'll be checking out that as well. So that'll be a really, really cool opportunity. We will be sharing it on our social media. And then we also are hosting an event called Discover the Innovation Sector. That's happening at 4:30. We're really encouraging folks that are new to the innovation sector to come out and explore how to get involved. If you're already involved in the innovation sector, we're encouraging you to share it to people that are new to the ecosystem, just to introduce them. So I'll throw that link in the chat. And Ross, I will pass it over to you.
Speaking of Innovation Week, I have got a plug for two events. One is next week on November 16th at 4 p.m. The City of Calgary is hosting an event on how the city can support innovative businesses. And with Civic Tech YYC, it lands on the night before Innovation Week. So we're having a night before Innovation Week session. So if you're a speaker who's wanting to plug and talk about your event and talk to other people who are attending the week or want to help fill out your schedule by talking with other people, we're going to have a casual chat there. So I'm just dropping both of those links in chat there.
Awesome. Thank you, Ross. Yeah, there's a lot of events happening next week for Innovation Week. So I threw the link in the chat. That's where you can go to see everything that's happening. Are there any other announcements?
Just a quick one. I pumped it into the chat and on the 16th, Innovation Week. But at Platform, we're doing the how to build a strong entrepreneurial, resilient entrepreneurial brain. And it's the second in a series, and I suggest you come out because it's important. We're dealing with imposter syndrome, which is part of this conversation, and building your own strength and personal resilience and all that fun stuff. So come on out, have fun. And we're going to feed you a little bit, some snack bars, maybe.
Pete, do you want to put the link back in the chat? I think there was a glitch with it and it took me to a bad address.
Okay, I will repost it right now. Go ahead and carry on. I gotta find it one more time.
Oh, I think someone else just posted it.
Nice. Thank you, someone
Perfect.
else.
Thanks, Teresa. Are there any other announcements? No.
Make somebody happy today. Tell them a
Okay.
joke, even if it's a dad joke, for God's sake.
Dad jokes are the best jokes.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, also, if you're interested in the YYC Queer Innovation Meetups, we will be having a meetup soon. It's coming. I know I always say that, but it's coming, I promise. Most likely the end of November. Stay tuned. All right. And that's it. And hopefully we'll see you next week in person for Lunch Without Lunch. Thank you everyone for joining us. Have a great week. See you next week.